Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining us on Revelation TV's The Late Show. I just made it by the skin of my teeth tonight, as usual, but it's nice to be back in the UK. And I'd just like to give you a warm welcome to the show. I think it's going to be quite interesting. I'm saying because I wasn't involved in what was happening earlier today, but my co-host here, Tim Vince. Good evening, Tim.
Good to see you, Howard.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Good to see you looking well.
Thank you. Yeah, I was falling apart on Sunday, but God's done a restorative work in me, may I say, by His grace. Yeah, still keeping me going. But Tim, you know, it's been a few weeks since we worked together, but you've had an interesting afternoon. Tell us a little bit about who you were interviewing, which we're going to be showing very shortly.
Yeah, I've been in touch with Jonathan Feldstein for quite a while. He's a prolific networker among Christians across the world, and he made Aliyah a few years ago. He's got a family in Israel. His son is in Gaza at the moment. We talk about that in this short interview. Okay. But today he went down to Re'im, where 370 young people were massacred.
At the music festival, was it?
At the music festival, and he filmed. So this is just footage from today. He filmed like a memorial, just showing the pictures of these children really in the fields where they were shot down, and it's quite moving really. And then I discussed with him. He wrote an article in a Christian newspaper about Hanukkah and how Christians could pray for Israel during these 8 days of Hanukkah. So we go on and talk about that.
So is he an Israeli Jew?
Yeah, he's Israeli Jewish. I think he made Aliyah, I'm going to get this wrong, so apologies, Jonathan, if you're watching. I think it was 2014, and so his son recently married in August, and he's already gone off to war. So.
So you made this, it was a Skype call or something?
Yeah, it was a Skype call with him in Jerusalem. And yeah, we open up first talking about how difficult, because he's showing a field. You can hardly imagine what happened in that field. Mm. And of course, we just got posters of the faces of those who fell. How difficult it is to get the truth across in today's media world.
Yes, very hard. But let's not waste time, because we want to see the interview as well. Yeah. But people can actually write in during the time that you're going to be watching this. It's probably about 25 minutes. Obviously, Tim thinks it's really important that you see this, and write in, and we'll, at the end of the program here, towards the end of the 27 minutes, whatever length it is, you will go through the emails. So live at revelationtv.com, and the usual SMS will actually be coming up on your screens from time to time. So let's, without further ado, let's try and watch and glean as much as we can, because we need discernment. We need truth. We need to be able to hopefully validate the things that are happening, because there's so much, if you like, just anti-Semitism still out there, and it's been there sort of in society for thousands of years.
Can I just add it opens with the footage that he filmed this morning, just so that people know. And it's Jonathan Feldstein, and he's president of something called the Genesis 123 Foundation, and he talks about that as well.
Okay, well, let's have a look at this, and do write in and keep in contact with us throughout the program.
I'm joined now by Jonathan Feldstein, and Jonathan has been down in Re'im today, where that terrible massacre took place. And before we go through this interview and talk about Hanukkah, let's watch some of the footage of what Jonathan filmed today.
Shalom, friends. You're not seeing me because I'm not important right now. This is Jonathan Feldstein with the Genesis 123 Foundation, and I'm standing outside of kibbutz Re'im in southern Israel, where on October 7th there was a music festival here across this whole field. The tent in the distance was the bar, and there were thousands of young men and women who were here You're seeing pictures here of those who were either killed, many raped, mutilated, kidnapped to Gaza. There are about 370 young men and women who were killed on this site, and I don't know how many were taken hostage from here, but many of them are still hostages, men and women. We're real close to the Gaza border. You can't hear it, but there's an aircraft just overhead. Maybe you can. I feel like I'm in a combination of Woodstock, where there was a music festival in 1969, and Auschwitz, where thousands of Jews were slaughtered on a daily basis. Look at their faces. All of these people were killed, were slaughtered. Since the hostages have been, the beginning of the hostages being released, though there are still many, many who were in Gaza, over 100. The horrific crimes, the sexual crimes, the rape, the sexual mutilation of women here in this very spot had become public. It's horrifying, it's astounding, it's angering. Look at these beautiful people. And I keep walking and walking, and I'm not getting all of the pictures. I feel like I have a duty to do that. And I want to share something with you that we are doing with the Genesis 123 Foundation.
Jonathan, very powerful video of Raim, and it would be good just to talk through that together. It's great to have you, by the way, to see you in person, as it were, on Skype, the best we can do. And what I'd like to ask first is how difficult is it to prove to the world's media? You were down there where this terrible massacre took place, and yet we have, most of the mainstream media and the social media riding on the back of it, saying that these things didn't happen. How do you get the message across?
Well, the sad part is, Tim, is it's not difficult to prove. The evidence is abundant, and terribly sad. The visit there today was, even just thinking about it now, is painful. There's so much evidence just in what I saw now 2 months later, and I don't think it's a question of how to prove it. I think it's a question of how to get the media and people who have any doubt about the authenticity of what happened and or an anti-Semitic bias. Whereas if it were to happen anywhere else in the world, there would be no hesitation to believe it. But we're seeing, especially with the sexual crimes that took place against women 2 months ago and are still taking place, we believe, with the hostages who are held and have been held. I think it just requires somebody to have a decency and an open mind. The evidence is abundant, sadly.
And just going back to that video you took today, so it's absolutely hot off the press. The 370 were killed, and in addition to 370, others were taken hostage. Just on the 370 number.
Just from there, and that's about 5 kilometers from the Gaza border. So those who were so we get a sense of how people were able to arrive from Gaza very quickly and hustle out those who they didn't kill on the spot or who were able to get away. Very few. We saw burn marks on the road, multiple places where it was evident that cars were scorched, burnt beyond recognition, along sometimes with people inside them. I wasn't prepared to be there today. I didn't know where I would get But when I opened up that video and I said, it feels like I'm at a combination between Woodstock and Auschwitz, it should have been just a beautiful music festival with young people celebrating. But in the end, this was a site of a bloody massacre where about 25% of the people who were slaughtered that day were killed on that very field where I stood.
Wow, that's absolutely shocking. And yeah, I mean, my first question was almost completely stupid, except for the fact that there are people out there who are rejecting the facts. And, things like tunnels, the talk of 300 miles of tunnels, there are already people out on social media saying, well, they don't exist or it's exaggerated. And all Israel really can do is show the entrance, the hole at the entrance to a tunnel, and maybe a little bit of internal. It is quite difficult when you have literally Holocaust deniers out there, within weeks.
I want to share something interesting. It was nothing that I did today was scripted. I couldn't have scripted it. I didn't know that there would be artillery going off in the distance when I made that film. And that happened several times during the course of my visit. But I visited with a dear friend, Pastor Trey Graham, who's on the advisory board of the Genesis 123 Foundation, of which I'm president. And we went and brought gifts to soldiers. We went and brought them warm heaters for their hands and protein bars and other kinds of snacks. And he just arrived from the US. And he has a military background. I said to him at one point, Trey, with the infrequency of the artillery fire that we're hearing, that's saying that there's real precision, that this is not a indiscriminate bombing, but that it's super precise and the targets are being lined up, and it's only those targets, doesn't it? Does that make sense what I said? And he agreed with me. He has the military background, but it was evident being there. It wasn't a constant boom, 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 as you would think in a battlefield.
It wasn't carpet bombing, and I think I saw Naftali Bennett speaking on some media interview, basically saying that it would have been a much shorter conflict, except for the fact that Israel are trying to the best of their ability to target Hamas, but quite difficult.
It would be a much shorter conflict, and my son wouldn't be there risking his life in order to be as precise as they are right now, getting the terrorists and not having any civilians killed in the process. That's not the goal.
Shall we just focus a little on your family, because you're not just, as it were, commenting on something that's distant from your home and your family. Your son is actually there in the conflict.
Yeah, one of the hardest things today is to be just a few miles from where, I don't know precisely where he is, but we have a good idea. His phone was taken when he went into Gaza this week, so we don't know. But my God, I just wanted to go be with him, to see him, to take up arms with him and defend him. But yeah, it's terribly scary. Outside right now, my daughter-in-law, they're married since July, so what, 5 months? 5 months now? Not even, yeah, there they are. This is just when he came home recently. And they should be living their life together, not with him in combat. And she's super, she's so strong. But they should just be newlyweds in their own place. And it's disrupting our life. My son-in-law is also in a combat unit and has been away more than not. And it's hard for my daughter. We have 3 grandchildren, 5 and under. And we're frequently stepping in because he's not there. And 3 little boys need help. And it's the stress. It's the stress. I said to my wife the day he went into Gaza, of course, we're fearful for his safety, but it's not knowing, because no matter what age we are as parents, and I've learned this over the last 3 decades, no matter what age we are, our job is still to care for and protect our children. And now I can only pray.
Yeah, it's really tough to be going there in the first year of marriage, because I think there's some biblical injunction not to do that, if at all. But it's such an extreme situation. That must be really hard to bear.
It's challenging, and when I have conversations like this, I become more emotional because I have the downtime and presence of mind to think about it. But most of the time, I just try to plug through and do what I need to do with my writing, with my fundraising for our emergency campaign, and
Yeah, so I wanted to go on to your writing, because earlier in the year you published an absolutely amazing book, Israel, the Miracle, and I don't know of another book, I've read many on Israel, that has so many contributors who I know or know secondhand, as it were, and that is quite an achievement. That you've got Anne Graham Lotz, a great Pat Robertson, Chris Mitchell, a whole number of folk who viewers of this channel will know well. Could you talk a little bit about Israel, the Miracle, the book, and the place?
Indeed, yeah. The book is now more meaningful than I thought it would be when God put this on my heart just over a year ago. And it's a miracle in of itself that as of yesterday, the book arrived at our fulfillment center. It was printed here in Israel and was delayed getting out because of the war. Israel the Miracle is a compilation of 75 essays by 75 Christian leaders from all over the world. We have 3 or 4 from the UK, if I'm not mistaken, multiple denominations, ethnicities, running the age gamut. And what I charged them all with was to write why Israel's significant to you. And 75, because even though we're in the midst of a war, we're celebrating Israel's 75th anniversary. Wow. So I wanted to give 75 voices, and each one, which was so also miraculous, was so different. They really are not redundant at all. Everyone has his or her own unique take. And it's printed as a coffee table book because we wanted to make it experiential. So we've got photos and art by incredible artists who donated their work so they could be part of this project. And it is incredible because what I realized is if anyone had attempted this 25 years ago for our 50th anniversary, it would have been much harder to find 25 bona fide Christian leaders who can write with integrity about why Israel is significant to them. Today we had this year we had an overflow.
Yeah. I was very impressed. I was very impressed because I know the Van Ord family very well. I knew Carol Van Ord, and it was lovely to see his son Frank in there, who's Director of Christians for Israel, and also Willem Glashauer. So you really have they're from Holland, but from the UK you have Lord Reading, Simon Reading, who's also a great friend, and then of course some of the key influential leaders in the United States. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing achievement.
It's a blessing. Anyone who was interested in the book, especially in the UK, I don't want you to order it from our website. I want you to go through our website and be in touch with us, because the website will charge a whole lot of money to ship it. We're trying to figure out a way to have fulfillment in the UK that will cost a lot less money. But the website is israelthemiracle.com. And please be in touch with us, and we're going to figure out a way to get you lots of copies there. That's
wonderful. Now, in addition to your authorship, you also write in various news publications, and I've seen some of these articles. In particular, you've just written about Hanukkah and how Christians can pray during this 8-day festival, which starts tomorrow evening. Could you tell us a little bit about your thoughts? And we'll also, by the way, Jonathan, we'll show on the screen a little later for prayer, your 8 prayer points for Hanukkah. But just tell us a little bit about that.
So good. I'm glad you'll show them, because I don't remember them there, but it was collaboration with a number of Christian friends. I gave them ideas and they tweaked it, because I always joke in a self-deprecating way that I'm never the smartest person in the room unless I'm alone. And so I always rely on my friends. But with Hanukkah, as a Jewish tradition, and many Christians who are following know this, we light the Hanukkah menorah in the window, because we have a concept in Hebrew called pirsumei mitzvah, the public recognition of commandments and of miracles in our lives. And Hanukkah is the holiday of miracles. It's the miracle of the military victory over people who also wanted to slaughter us and ruin and kill Judaism and Jews. And it's the miracle of the rededication of the temple almost 2,300 years ago. And so,
by the way, you mention in your article about about Jesus being there at the Feast of Dedication. That was interesting in John.
It's not even in the Old Testament. There is no recognition in the Old Testament of the celebration of Hanukkah, and it's only in Christian scripture, in John 10, where we know that Jesus, as an Orthodox Jew here in the land, celebrated what was called the Feast of the Dedication, and how amazing that is another thing that brings us as Jews and Christians together.
It is amazing.
Right?
Just adding to that, because we will be giving as much information as we can during the festival, the feast. But just very quickly, tell us what it was all about with Judas Maccabee and also the threat of Antiochus Epiphanes.
Right. So the threat was a cultural and spiritual genocide, physical as well, but they really wanted to do away with Judaism and Jewish culture and our faith, which would have been devastating. Think about it. 2,300 years ago, if that had happened, there wouldn't have been a Jesus. There wouldn't have been a Jesus as a Jewish man who was so significant to billions of Christians around the world. So that was a military victory, and part of that battle took place out the window here in the Judean mountains where I live. And I've done podcasts about that where we talk about what are the sites, because it actually happened here in the land. And the other piece, of course, is the rededication of the temple. After the first temple was destroyed, we came back from exile 70 years. We were able to rededicate the temple, but the temple was in ruins. It was laid in ruins, kind of like what we see in many of the communities on the Gaza border right now. And in order to rededicate the temple, it required a certain amount of pure oil. And only one vial was found, and that was an amount useful for one day. And the miracle of that is that it lasted for 8 days, which was the amount of time that was needed in order to reproduce new oil so that the temple service could continue in this rededication. So we celebrate multiple miracles at this time. We're praying for more miracles today. And we also eat fried foods because of the symbolism of oil. So eating potato pancakes that are fried in oil and jelly donuts that are fried in oil just adds to the festivity. And it's important this year that we celebrate even amidst the war, because we can never, ever stop thanking God, even amongst the trials that we're facing. Never, ever not acknowledge him and thank him for the miracles that he's still doing for us today.
Wow. Do you know, the first time I visited Israel was in 1987, Hanukkah 1987, and my Bible was given to me by a friend, Lance Lambert. I don't know whether they can see it on the screen, but it mentions here Christmas 87 and Hanukkah 5748 as the book was given to me. Now that was the outbreak of the Intifada, what they call the first Intifada, and I was there at Damascus Gate when trouble broke out, which was all orchestrated by who. But the problem is that there's so many lessons we need to learn, even from the festival of Hanukkah, are there not? Because folks can forget. And even Antiochus Epiphanes, the fourth, he was trying to, as you say, extinguish the Jewish identity. And there was a great danger of assimilation. We feel that as Christians today, that there's a danger that even Christians, for the sake of a quiet life, will ignore realities and spiritual realities. And
that's
I don't know
so
what your thoughts are about that.
It's so you just hit a cultural historic nerve for me, because while you were here celebrating Hanukkah in Jerusalem in 1987, this week in 1987, I was in Washington, D.C. as one of 250,000 people protesting the treatment and the lack of freedom for Jews of the Soviet Union. I used to work with many wonderful people in the UK from the 35s and others around the world.
Yes.
But what's incredible about that, and why am I thinking of it, is the anniversary of that is this week. But that was the same attempt at cultural genocide. The Soviets weren't killing us physically, but they were preventing Jews from worshiping, from practicing, from even studying Judaism, much less Hebrew. And it's the same thing. And we say we say in our liturgy, and we sing in our songs, especially now, we thank God for the miracles that he did for us in those days and today. And we also still recognize that it's the same, that there are enemies who are always out to get us. And it sounds dramatic. It sounds a little bit melodramatic to some, but we're living 2 months after the biggest massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. So it's not dramatic, it's the reality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you said if the Maccabees hadn't triumphed, we wouldn't, the rest of history, it would have been the end of history. But there's so many ifs in the Bible and so many ifs through history where God has delivered the Jewish people and has delivered us. And I think it's a fantastic festival to have a festival of light, which for me symbolizes truth as much as anything, and a festival of freedom, which is what we all cherish.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, I was doing a webinar about Hanukkah with a group of African pastors, and they had never heard of the holiday. And I was explaining it, and one pastor has become a very dear friend, said to me in public, to the whole gathering on Zoom, he said, "Wow, it's such a great holiday. How come you don't celebrate it more frequently?" Now, of course, we celebrate it according to the biblical calendar, but it is, and it's so important this year. It's so important, and it goes back to my book. It's a holiday of miracles. Israel's existence is a miracle, and there's suffering that goes along with it. But we have to thank God for the miracles.
Wonderful. Yeah, just mentioning the book again, I've just thought that you have Malcolm Hedding in there. He's a great friend of ours. Jürgen Buhler from the International Christian Embassy. I just wonder whether I'll put up on the screen, hopefully you can see them as well, your 8 prayer points, because it's quite fitting for an 8-day festival. And I'm going to read them out. I think it's in the right order, the way you've set it out, Jonathan. So hopefully you can see them as well. That we should pray for all the hostages to be released and come home to their loved ones safely and right away. That's still the chief aim, isn't it, of the operation in Gaza?
Well, we need to crush Hamas, but yes, we need to bring home all the hostages safely. And it breaks my heart knowing what the ones that got out have endured, and I can't imagine what the others are enduring now.
Yeah, desperate. And then the second, let's call it the second day of Hanukkah, viewers, you can pray for the families of the hostages, that they continue to remain strong physically, emotionally, and in their faith. And then the third day, pray for the families and loved ones of more than 1,200 people who were massacred. It's so easy to forget. They're massacred by Hamas terrorists on October the 7th, that they should find strength despite their terrible loss and derive comfort from the love and support of Christians and Jews around the world. That's our first 3 days, and I'll keep reading if you don't mind, Jonathan. Pray for the full and speedy physical and emotional recovery of thousands of Israelis who were injured physically and scarred emotionally since October the 7th. These are really big prayers. It should never be perfunctory, should it? We should, every single life and the myriad of families that are affected, they're quite deep, really deep. My concern with prayer is that we just do it as a kind of ritual, but it's so important for us to really deeply pray. Pray for these folk. Let me go through the rest of the list.
Sure.
Pray for the hundreds of thousands of Israelis who have been uprooted from their communities, that have been destroyed and must be rebuilt, and those who have been evacuated from border areas because of the threats of war and terror, literally in their backyard. That's quite and if I may just pull out again, sorry for disrupting the list, Jonathan, but there's communities in the north as well that we've been supporting who are all evacuated, aren't they?
Yes, indeed. I was in a hotel in Jerusalem last night that is housing many evacuees. It's one of the largest hotels, and it's pretty much full with evacuees from the north.
And how do you? I don't know whether we have any numbers on that, but it must be enormous numbers across the country.
Tens of thousands of people. tens of thousands.
Yeah, I think the news media just they gloss over all of that. We hardly hear anything of what life is like within Israel. Okay, the number 6 on our list. Pray for the safety and success of the IDF, that collectively and individually they will have divine protection to defend Israel with the morals and courage that are needed. If I may just pull out, and we'll read the final 2. We know Colonel Richard Kemp quite well, and he's pointed out to audiences over recent years how moral the Israeli Defense Force are, and how armies around the world come to observe. How do they manage to minimize the civilian casualties?
Yeah, well, Richard Kemp is one of our authors in the book as well, and has a very special essay that's particularly relevant today.
Okay, I'm pleased you said that. Let's just read the final 2 days of Hanukkah. Pray that millions of Christians around the world will lend their voices by signing the petition to free all the hostages and encourage Israel to resist international pressure at this time in any way that will put Israel at greater risk. Now, you have a petition, don't you? Could you just mention that, Jonathan?
Sure. So we're encouraging Jews and Christians all over the world, tens of thousands, please God willing, hundreds of thousands, to join us. The petition is available at genesis123.co, and we need to give the backing for Israel to be able to continue the military campaign that's necessary, to do whatever is necessary to bring home the hostages, and to resist the mounting pressure that is continuing day by day on Israel to either for another inopportune ceasefire or for a cessation of all fighting. And this is not an optional battle anymore. This is existential, and we have to win.
Thank you. Finally, the final prayer for Hanukkah. Pray that God will change the hearts of evil Islamic terrorists of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Islamic Jihad on Israel's borders, and the source of the evil from the Islamic regime in Iran. And pray for Palestinian Arabs who will also have a change of heart, that they will no longer support terrorism, and that it says, a new gathering of leaders will be raised up who will put the well-being of the Palestinian people above the hatred of Israel. Jonathan, that's a really powerful prayer list. We're out of time on this interview segment, but I just want to say thank you so much for giving us the time to go through these important prayer points, but also give your insights from your visit today down on the border. And I'm hoping that we'll have other opportunities to talk to you if you're available.
Anytime. It's a pleasure, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's important for us, it's important for your viewers to hear, and for me personally, it's therapeutic, so I'm grateful.
Bless you. Thank you very much. We'll be praying for your son and your daughter-in-law and your family as well. God bless you.
Well, we thank Jonathan Feldstein for actually appearing today live with Tim Vince just a few hours before we did the program. And also, if you want to get the book, I did note what Jonathan was saying, so that it could be handed out a lot cheaper if you just wait until they've got the information where you can actually get that rather than going on their website. So thanks very much, Jonathan. And Israel, the Miracle, and reminds me when I first, and we've all got a story to tell about how we got involved in looking at why Israel is so important to us as Christians, and not only that, to the rest of the world, if they but knew it. And I actually went there, Tim, first of all, in the late 60s, and then I went on my second trip in 1979 when I came across Romans 11, and that, for me, in my own private time when I was reading scriptures, was why God did not reject the Jews. And yet I suppose the teaching around at that time that I'd heard was everything was anti the Jew, very, very much blaming the Jews for what happened to Jesus Christ, being put to death, etc., etc. So it's really important. It motivated me to go. I drove to the land on my own.
Amazing.
And obviously I had to go through
the VW
beat up old van, and it got back, and that was the end of it, by the way. That van, it just got me back. I spent 3 months. I stayed on a kibbutz, worked on a kibbutz actually, and also just wanted to know more about God's people, the Jews. And I've learned so much since then, and I thank God for the time that I've been able to get involved with Revelation TV, people like with Tim Vince, and who have a heart to get the truth out. And there's so much wrong information out there that people have taken hold of, and if you like, made it even worse for the Jews than what they've already experienced for thousands of years, as I said earlier. Now, emails that you want to send in right now, please do that, live@revelationtv.com, and also the SMS numbers on your screen as well. Most of our viewers, as you know, Tim, they're very familiar. I'm in Revelation TV for the last 20 years, yeah. But we met, a few years before that,
didn't we? We met a few years before, where at the home of a very, mutual friend, Elias Fatal, and Itamar Marcus was there asking for support for the Palestinian Media Watch, which he had only just set up. And that's critical now because it's showing the root problem, which is the media, the government, and the education of the Palestinians. It's tragic, actually.
Interesting you should mention that, because one of the journalists that, if you like, videographers, was Palestinian himself, and he used to send what was going on behind the scenes, and I used to be able to put it out. I wish I still had that footage, but I've lost it, where he would actually show us that what was going on with the leaders then, PLO would it have been at that time?
Yeah, it was Fatah, and they were given autonomy, and they pretty well educating the children to hate.
Exactly, but what he was showing me was what was going on behind the scenes, because he was a Palestinian, shooting video, as it were, and showing us the guns that were in people's belts, but throwing stones at the Israeli army. It's the stones, the poor people against the big guns and bullets and tanks. But he had his machine gun, and then obviously I got that footage, and I was able to put that out and show the other side. And the other thing, which was a little bit, deception at the very least, was they had people running into ambulances that were all bleeding and everything. But then after the show was over, the people who were supposedly shot and injured were all coming out, smoking a cigarette and having a laugh.
It's been happening for years, and that's the complicity of the Western media, that they haven't called it out 20, 30 years ago. So
we were doing it.
So what, from the Palestinian perspective, they think, they're swallowing all this, we'll carry on doing it. Yeah. And they're still doing it.
Okay, so let's have a look at some of the emails that are coming in.
Yeah, let's go for it. Margaret, you got in early before the show, but hi Tim and Howard, are you aware that Netflix are releasing this month a film with anti-Semitic lies depicting the IDF as monsters? In principle, I've never signed up to it, Netflix, but because of what they produce, particularly the way they've depicted Jesus Christ. From Margaret, I think they've pulled it. I did see something in the media to say that they've pulled it, but maybe someone else can say what's been happening. This is from Paul and Ruth. Good evening, Tim and Howard. Blessings to you both and all the team. Good to see you working so well after much prayer. We felt the pain in your heart and your call for the return of Christ on your broadcast with Sai, talking to you, Howard. We as Christians stand with you in this agony. God's timing will be perfect. Persevere and take heart. God is in control of all things. Our prayers are for Israel and the peace of Jerusalem, protection for the IDF in the face of the enemy.
Thank you. Can I just stop you there? Because that's a good segue into what I was showing as well, was the animation, 3D dimensional, of the temple. This was finished by Herod in 4 CE. And if we've got some of that B-roll, this was done at such a high level. My brother-in-law was working on it for a whole year. He's gone into every intricacy. But this shows you that this was in the hands of the Jews in 4 CE alone. Obviously, it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, but this was rebuilt because the initial one was Solomon's temple, which is about 1000 BCE. And these are amazing, sort of demonstrations of really this was in the hands of God's people, the Jews. You know, there's no mention of Palestinians or
Haram al-Sharif. I mean, I've noticed over the last 25 years, they've, instead of calling it the Temple Mount, which obviously, as it were, puts a stamp of authenticity on the Jewish heritage, they don't even talk about it as the Temple Mount.
No.
They've started to change the whole historic narrative.
Well, this is the role that Revelation TV and people like yourself have been playing for, 20, 30 years, is explaining to people the history of Israel. It's not something that just appeared in 1947 or in the late 19th century.
And that graphic, by the way, is not invented.
No,
That's not from Jeremy's imagination. That is from the scale of the location and the historic remains.
Yeah, and my great uncle, Claude Rainier Conda, had something to do with that as well. He worked with Lord Kitchener as well in the late 1800s. Sorry. Yeah. So all of this, as Tim is saying, is all done to scale, and the way in which this was executed to the letter that God wanted everything to be just so perfect in the way that it was, and it was. For Jewish, it's a Jewish temple, and it was for Jewish worship, and it was all done, at least this one, nearly 2,000 years ago. Well, over 2,000 years ago, wouldn't be.
And the amazing thing is that, when the disciples were saying how wonderful it all was, he said not one stone would be left on another.
Which was a bit of a shock, and that's why I did
it was
in that.
A shock, but it actually proved to be
point, and that's why we should take note. And that adds the credibility to what the Lord Jesus Christ was actually able to do, was to prophesy as he sat on the Mount of Olives, would have been around about AD 33, to his disciples, that this is going to happen. Of course, they would have going, that's never going to happen, but it did happen. But
tell you, it's really interesting that Jonathan mentioned the Feast of Dedication, and I hadn't thought about it before, that it's not mentioned in the Old Testament.
I know, yeah. It's just that because of...
And then, it's there in John 10 that the Lord went at winter time. It acknowledges this because it was a very dramatic. It was a dramatic event in recent memory. The overthrow of, the work of Judas Maccabee, and the whole story of Hanukkah.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to go through some more emails as well. What else we can squeeze in tonight?
Okay, let's go. Sorry if I've skipped, because I looked down and then more emails have come in. Howard, you look well again. Thank God. Thank you, Tim, for the interview. I pray for Jonathan and his family and his son and all the IDF and the Jewish people all over the world, the apple of God's eye. Thank you. That's an anonymous text, but it's very personal. You're asking about us. But good evening, Tim and Howard. It's only because of the war between Israel and Hamas that I'm learning about the importance of Israel to our Christian faith. Can't remember ever being taught about it in church or any sermons about it, and yet I'm blown away just how central it is. This is all coinciding with the study I'm doing on Exodus, and learning about Israel has made this study come to life for me. Howard, I hope you're feeling better, and remember to take care of yourself. That's from Laura.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the visit to the hospital last Sunday was amazing, really, because it helped me to get put on the right antibiotics and things like that. And I've now regained my voice back, and my chest is working a lot better, so it's not the end of me yet.
I think it was Kathleen from Northern Ireland, the anonymous text. Thank you.
Supposed to be anonymous.
I don't mind anonymous. As long as it's decent.
Yes.
Les says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose hearts. Kay, someone else says, we need to remember there are Christians trapped in Gaza and the West Bank that also need prayer and to be rescued. Absolutely right. I ended my late show last week. Let's just pray for the liberation of the Palestinian people from Hamas.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that, because I was going to bring it up as well, because it's not just the people of Israel that are suffering. It's actually the Palestinian people themselves, because of Hamas's intent to actually use them not only as a shield, but also as a way of funding their nefarious regime.
Yeah. And Jean writes, so heartbreaking to see the faces of those beautiful people massacred on October the 7th. Never seen anything like that on the news channels, but obviously they wouldn't show that. God is patient, very patient. He is compassionate, but a time will come when his wrath will be spilled out. Let us remember the Jews are the apple of his eye. Second time someone's written that. And us as Christians are indebted to them, as it's through them we are grafted in. Thank you, Revelation TV, the real full truth as always. Meg writes, could you please tell us when we can see that list of prayers for Hanukkah? I just switched on as you were going through the list. You can see it in the repeat, yes. Meg, and also we will...
it should be online as well. We've had lots of problems with our online...
video on demand,
Video on demand, yeah. But yes, the satellite, change the satellite settings and things like that, the things they do to us, over the years. But we're still
if we have time, we could show them maybe at the end of the show, if you're still tuned in. This is from Reverend Myra. As you were talking about the dreadful things happening to the Israelis, I was watching on Facebook the section of film from where Moses was, with God's help, raising his arms to open the Red Sea for Israelis to walk through, then closing it as the Egyptian soldiers tried to follow them. Made me think, where is our faith? What God has done before, he can do again if all Christians and Israelis come together in prayer, asking him to make the whole thing right.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, isn't it? Yeah. What we're talking about there is God, when things looked as if the Egyptian army was just there to wipe them out and finish them off, he parted the waters. All the miracles that have ever happened as well, and particularly concerning his chosen people, it's going to be difficult. It talks about it in Scripture for them, but they're the ones that are going to see the Messiah come and defend them as well when all the nations come against them. Zechariah 12-14.
Yeah. So Philip, I don't know whether you can see that online, but he shows a Hanukkah and a Christmas tree, and his title is Hanukkah, Let There Be Peace on Earth. It reminds me when I first went to Israel and Lance had this Christmas tree. Yeah. But whenever Jewish people were around, he called it a Hanukkah bush.
Okay.
That's pretty well it. I had one from Brian talking about an interview I did with Gavin Ashington yesterday. He said it was sad, it was only 27 minutes. It was quite an interesting interview, actually.
Was it?
Gavin, he used to be the Queen's chaplain, and he describes how he was given the marching orders, but it was just all very polite how the Lord Chamberlain basically said. And the reason was because what he was saying about Islam in the press, because he was a scholar and saying there's no difference between Islamism and Islam. And anyway, the Lord Chamberlain said, people might think, that the Queen agrees with you, and they might be right.
What else can we put into this section? But what else can we put into this section? I mean, if necessary, we could actually show a little bit from the Jesus Speaks at the beginning, but I'm not sure whether you've got the up-to-date version, so this was something that I'd finished.
You can definitely show the prayer again, the 8 days of Hanukkah. I won't read them all out as I did earlier, but as you asked for it, was it Meg who asked for it? Should we put them up on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so these were the prayers for Hanukkah. There's 8 days of Hanukkah, praying for the hostages, praying for the families of the hostages, praying for the families and loved ones of those who were massacred, the 1,200 who were massacred, and then going on to the fourth prayer for the full and speedy physical and emotional recovery of thousands of Israelis injured and physically scarred and emotionally scarred since October the 7th. Pray for hundreds of thousands of Israelis uprooted from their communities, and those communities need to be rebuilt. And I know that the tithe from Time for Revelation, that's going to be very valuable, by the way, Howard, because Dan, who's gone up to Adamit today, he said they need to plant trees because the kibbutz is in the line of fire of anti-tank missiles and whatever else from the Hezbollah border.
Okay, so that's in the north.
Pretty practical stuff. Yeah, that's in the north. And
that's
because they anticipated the same could happen.
Yeah, I was in Kfar Bloom which was right. It was under some fire even at the time, around about 1979, I think it was, too. There was still the old firing that was coming from the Golan Heights and right across our heads, you know.
And by the way, we went. I can't remember whether you came on it. We did a prayer trip during the Lebanon War, where not the 82
Go
one.
to the border.
Yeah, we went, and they call it the friendship line.
Right by the sea, isn't it? Yeah, I remember that.
But you know, we saw in Safad, where we often go, all of these, you know, ball-bearing, you know, missiles that literally just were randomly, you know, destroying and maiming people. But no, I was speaking earlier today with someone from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel, asking them how long before we can start traveling to Israel. And again, he said, you know, let's keep our eyes open in January, because what Israel is doing is quite effective at the moment, and you know, it may actually
settled.
Yeah, it may have settled. So
okay. I mean,
we'll see.
We've met over the years as well, different people, you know, Palestinians as well, who are co-workers with ministries, with the Christians, but also with the Jews as well, and they're volunteering. And I can remember that one particular lady that I interviewed. She was a Palestinian. She said, you know, the land belongs to the Jews, and we, you know, we accept that, and we get on really well. And we got to remember there are so many people that, especially at the time of the 1947, just prior to that, there was peace and harmony. There were people that were quite happy to work together and live together in peace, and that carried on for many years. And it was this element of hatred that was coming across by the groups that were just wanting to get Israel off the map altogether, not even sharing in what's, you know, you could understand if they would say, okay, well, help us. And I think if they'd had a different attitude and they were, you know, if you like, more malleable in that sense and more
Israel
peace
would have
loving.
done the deal.
Absolutely.
They've always done the deal, all the way through. Here we have a text from Kira just saying, "Dear Howard and Tim, much love and blessings in Yeshua. Thank you for your stand and for truth. Can I ask Howard to use the term AD and BC rather than BCE and CE?"
Yeah.
Actually Jewish people use, you know, Common Era and before the Common Era.
Yeah, well, I like it because it's before Christ. That's the way I do it. It's a little bit of a statement, okay, and after death, AD, you know, because they've taken that out of the calendar. We've got, you know, the Common Era now. Well, no, it's not Common Era. It's really after the death of Christ. That's what was the dividing line. Yeah. So, you know, I could have a little bit more of an argument about it, why I do it. But it's before Christ, BCE, AD, after death as well. But it's just sometimes, you know, you've got to put something down, and I didn't want to, you know, to put a lot of work into that.
You can't eradicate the fact that the Lord was here, that's for sure, because Channel 4 tried it once, you know, I think it was called Jesus the Myth. They did a 4-part series. Anyway.
How crazy.
Brian, thank you for writing. I found it an interesting insight in what Jonathan had to say about the incident of Hanukkah occurring 2,300 years ago, and that if the Jews had lost the battle and all been wiped out, that Jesus from the tribe of Judah might not have come for the Christians of 2,000 years ago and today. As for those that would be blessed, that waited until the coming of the 1335 of days, might not have come for them on the date that was predicted in Daniel's 70 weeks of years. Daniel 8:13 also speaks of the 2,300 days as to when the temple would be cleansed. The 3.5 years of Jesus' ministry, death and resurrection numbers also add up to 8. Shalom from Brian. Thanks, Brian. You've managed to squeeze that in.
Well done.
To the last
one little bit there of the temple, what would be really nice, I think Nathan's got it together, is that just to be reminded, just the absolute, if you like, detail that was there. This is as you go into the main sanctuary, and then beyond this is you've got the inner sanctuary, which is obviously only for the high priest, but you see the candelabra, you know,
the menorah.
Menorah, yeah. And the showbread would have been there, yeah. And then, of course, is that the burnt incense? Is it?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
The burning of the incense. Do you get where you go around the corner on that?
I don't know whether it goes in.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jeremy had access to the Holy of Holies.
Well, I showed it on the whole thing, but you're just picking up the bits here. But again, the detail
It's
and everything.
beautiful, and the quality of the graphics, amazing.
And I think also just the realization that this was a reality, isn't something that's made up by Hollywood, and that the purposes behind it were really for the sanctification for the Jewish people and the holiness, and how God had made this His place of residence. That might sound crazy, doesn't it? What would the God of heaven want to do that? My goodness.
I think the other thing is, ISIS were destroying archaeological remains. If Hamas got anywhere near, some of these Jewish heritage sites, they'd
totally
wipe
destroyed.
out the archaeology.
Yeah.
They're absolute barbarians, and that's what they would do.
Okay, so have we got any more of the temple? I'm just because I just
we've
threw
got
that
2
in the
minutes
last
left.
minute. We've only got 2 minutes left. But Tim, where are you going next? Are you staying with us tomorrow morning? In the sense we're on
I'm
our
going to be
mornings?
with Gordon tomorrow morning,
Yep.
and I think I'm with you tomorrow evening, so we can pick up on maybe
good.
Boris talking about the COVID inquiry,
Oh my goodness.
or Rishi Sunak and his woes.
Yeah.
I'm sure we won't, by the way, but I just threw that in.
But so that just to let you know that our mornings will have Tim Vince as well. So tune in as well in the normal times in the UK. I think it's 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m.
Yeah.
And then on from that as well. So are you on part one?
Yeah.
You're on part one, so 10:30 in the morning. And obviously, we want to learn more about Israel. And where do we get all that from? Thank God, it's from the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and obviously into the New Testament, because the early Christians, in that sense, were the Jews. So again, and reminder that Jesus came for the lost sheep of Israel, not for anyone else at that stage. It was the Phoenician woman that was lucky enough in that sense to get in, but really God has a heart now to reach the Gentiles and all those who would like to do things God's way. God bless you. Thank you for joining us.